Erica Stegman is
Okay,
their
all
attorney.
right. Miss Stegman, are you with us, and are all your people present?
Commissioner, yes, I believe so. We might be missing under Morgan Water. Shannon, can you turn on the camera and the mic there?
Sure.
It might ask you to share your screen there on the side, or share your camera. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Did Mr. Wells make it?
Yes, we're all present and accounted for.
Okay, then we have everybody here, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. We'll now begin. Good morning. We're now on the record in case number 2020-00386, electronic application of Morgan County Water District for a rate adjustment pursuant to 807 Kentucky Administrative Regulation 5:076. My name is Michael Schmidt. I'm chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission, and I will be presiding today. Joining me via video conferencing is Vice Chairman Chandler and Dr. Talina Matthews. At this time, I would normally caution attendees to please set your cellular phones to silent mode or turn them off. Due to the current state of emergency in Kentucky, the Commission is hosting this hearing via video conferencing. Since this continues to be a learning experience for everyone, there are a few suggestions I would offer. In addition to the normal courtesies regarding cell phones, these tips may help with clarity and avoid feedback issues for the video conference hearing. Mute your microphone if you are not speaking. Attorneys, when interjecting, please state your name so that the video record is clear. If you use a phone for the audio and a computer for the video, turn off the computer audio. Otherwise, there will be feedback. If you're in a room with several people on their own computers, turn off the computer audio for all but one computer. Otherwise, there will be feedback. Once in the GoToMeeting software platform, go to your settings. The icon looks like a gear to ensure the microphone setting is on the microphone you are actually using. There's a pull-down menu feature in GoToMeeting settings that will list the available microphones. Use wired headphones or wired earbuds for better sound quality. Wired is preferred because wireless devices may lose power depending upon the length of the hearing. And keep a charger nearby in case your battery runs low. And last, please alert the Commission if you're experiencing technology failure that prevents your participation at any time in this proceedings. Attorneys should contact the staff at the previously provided cell phone number. The hearing today is for the purpose of taking evidence in the aforementioned case involving Morgan County Water District's application for a rate adjustment. At this time, would counsel for Morgan County please introduce herself along with any other counsel who may be present, together with the name of your client and the names of the witnesses who are available this morning.
Yes, Commissioner. Erica Stegman from Morgan County Water District. We have here today Shannon Elam, who is the general manager, and in the room with Shannon, although off camera for purposes of keeping the record clear today, and they can come on camera if needed to testify. We have the board chairman, Brian Wells, board member Zachary Engel, and Chernell Holbrook, who is the office manager at Morgan Water. And then in addition, on their own screens here, we've got board member Jared Fannin. We have Alan Vines from the Kentucky Rural Water, Steve Gunnell, who is a board member, and Mr. Paul Nesbitt, who is our engineer.
Okay, thank you. And for Commission staff?
Brittany Koenig for the commission.
Thank you. I noticed, Ms. Stegman, that notice of this hearing has been given and apparently was filed in the record maybe yesterday. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, at this time, we'll see if anyone is available for public comment. Should anyone from the public like to provide the Commission with public comment, instructions to call in are located on the website pscky.gov. Phone lines will remain open for several minutes at the start of this hearing and close if there are no callers or after everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Should you call in, please state your name and address for the record before making your statement, and please keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. If there is more than one caller, please be respectful and allow one person to make a statement at a time. It should be noted that comments may always be submitted in writing on the PSC's website at psc.ky.gov. Ms. Koenig, has anyone signed up to speak prior to this morning?
No, sir.
Okay, well, let's leave the phone line open for a minute or so to see if anyone would like to call in, and if not, then we'll proceed directly to the hearing. It doesn't look like we're going to get any callers from the public, so we'll proceed directly to the hearing. Ms. Stegman, I guess how we'll handle this is Ms. Koenig will advise, and maybe she already has, as to the witnesses she would like to speak with first, and I would then swear in your witness, and you would identify the witness by asking, questions about the name, position with the district, et cetera, and then allow Ms. Koenig to conduct what would amount to, I guess, what we'd say as attorneys a cross-examination, after which the commissioners can ask questions, and then you'll be have the opportunity to ask any questions you like in order to clarify any matter or to ask any questions that you may have, okay?
Okay, so you just want biographical information up front, is that correct?
Yeah,
Commissioner?
that's right. Just asking questions to introduce the witness so that we have that on the record. Ms. Koenig, who would you like to call first?
We'd like to call Alan Valines, please.
Okay, Mr. Valines. Right. Mr. Valines, I think you're on mute. And, okay, there you are. Mr. Valines, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Stegman?
Yes. Mr. Valines, where are you employed?
Kentucky Rural Water Association on a consulting basis.
I'm going to back up and ask you to state your full name and business address.
Alan Valines, 690 Scottsboro Circle, Bellingham, Kentucky.
And you said that you're employed with the Kentucky Rural Water Association?
On a consulting basis, yes.
Okay. And how long have you been consulting with Kentucky Rural Water?
Almost 7 years.
And in your position as a consultant with Kentucky Rural Water, have you worked with Morgan County Water District?
I have.
Okay. No further questions, Commissioner.
Thank you. Ms. Koenig, questions?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Mr. Valines.
Good morning.
Good morning. Please let me know if you can't hear me at any time or if you need me to repeat a question. So you helped Morgan County prepare the R for 2020-386. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in your preparation for that application, had you ever worked with Morgan County previously?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Can you describe how you go about what your services are to Morgan County and what you provide to them?
Basically, prepare the cost of service study, or pardon me, it's just a rate study using test year that's available at the time we begin the study. Make adjustments that are required and normal from PSC's staff standpoint, and recommend rate increase percentages and across the board rate increase with recommended rates as well.
Okay. And as part of that, does the utility just provide you records? Do you request a list of records to review, and or how does that
Yeah,
work?
that's right. That's how we actually began, by providing the utility a list of documents that are needed to do the work I just described, and then go through those in detail. Sometimes, or many times, there's additional detail that needs to be provided. So there are a couple of iterations to get the information that's needed.
Okay, and do you advise the utility in any way on best business practices, or do you critique the utility on their financial situation? Do you provide guidance in that way at all?
Yes, I do.
Okay, can you go into that a little bit more as far as how that happens?
Well, just in the course of reviewing the documents, some things come to light, and I might counsel the manager or the office manager, the person I'm working with, as I gather that information, that there could be improvements in certain areas, or maybe certain information is missing that's important, and they could improve their bookkeeping and accounting to produce that information in the future.
Okay. What kind of information were you missing when you gathered the records for Morgan County?
I think the biggest thing was the depreciation schedule. That came up also in the informal conference that was held in this case, but and I know staff noted that as well in the staff report, but there's not much detail in Morgan County's depreciation schedule. And I think that hurts the utility because they're not able to properly assign asset lives for many of the assets in their system. And that reduces the depreciation expense that they're able to claim on their operating reports.
Okay. Do you have an opinion as to the biggest financial difficulties that the utility is facing right now, Morgan County?
I think the biggest thing is just a shortage in revenue. As illustrated in our application and also in the staff report, they need over $300,000 in additional revenue to break even with their expenses and debt service. And so that would be the number one thing.
Okay, and were you aware that Morgan, in your review of things, did you review their past rate cases with the PSC?
No, I didn't.
Okay, were you aware that they had a rate case in 2016 where they did not accept the full recommendation that commission staff had
Yes, I
recommended?
did hear about that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your response.
I did hear about that, yes.
Okay, did you discuss that with Morgan County at all, or?
Just briefly, Mr. Elam and I talked about it, and I know he had some regrets that the full amount was not taken at that time.
Okay, do you ever discuss the frequency of rate cases with utilities and how that impacts?
Yes, I do.
Okay, did you discuss that with Morgan County?
I don't remember if I did that. I have on many occasions talked to customers that utilities that I'm working with, and encourage them to at least take a look at their situation every 2 or 3 years.
Okay, and do you have an opinion on how the rates are increased? I asked you about the frequency of rate cases, but there are different rate cases, correct? There's an 023 case with RD loans where there's a rate increase that happens because of a project. And there's a purchase water adjustment where there's a rate increase to address a change in the purchase water cost. And then there's a base rate, an alternative rate filing, or a regular rate case. Do you have an opinion, or do you ever advise utilities on which type of case they might need?
Well, yes, I do. But My advice depends on the situation. Of course, if there's simply an increase from the utility supplier, then of course a purchase water adjustment is the most appropriate and straightforward thing. If it's been several years since the utility has had a rate case, then I would encourage them to do the ARF application.
Okay. Are you aware of Morgan County's involvement in the 2019 41 investigation case?
Yes, I'm aware.
Okay. And you're aware that they were ordered to file an alternative rate case or a base rate case out of that case. Are you aware of that? So that's why we're in this alternative rate filing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So in your review of things, did you look at their data responses or the hearing for that case?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Part of that collection and investigation was where the commission asked the utilities to assess their financial difficulties or their operational difficulties and describe what they felt like their three biggest obstacles to succeeding as a utility were. And in the responses, Morgan County responded that their biggest obstacles were a lack of funds, a lack of employees that were dedicated to water loss and leak detection, and a lack of equipment. Would you agree that all three of those things could be addressed within a rate case?
Yes.
Okay. And were those issues addressed by you when you were developing their rate filing?
No.
Okay. So was there any discussion about employees or adding an employee or for leak detection?
Yes, we talked about that
Okay.
with Mr. Elam,
Okay.
and he's telling me what he's working on in terms of water loss remediation and trying to upgrade his staff and so forth.
Okay. And then was there any discussion about equipment or?
Not that I remember, no.
Okay. And so just to be clear, Morgan County has used Kentucky Rural Water Association for many different resources. And so are you involved or do you communicate in any way with, for instance, I believe they filed in some responses about the leak detection guidance that they've received from Kentucky Rural Water, and that maybe they've had some Kentucky Rural Water representatives attend their board meetings to advise them on different issues. Do you communicate with those people, like as far as a team from Kentucky Rural Water, or do you operate independently?
I mostly operate independently. I do make recommendations from time to time to some of the rural water staff that they touch bases with a certain utility if the utility has needs that we can help them with.
Okay. So did you advise Morgan County staff to reach out for other resources for Kentucky Rural Water Services in this case?
Not that I remember.
Okay. And did you ever communicate with Mr. Nesbitt on, Morgan County had a set of goals that they had worked out with Mr. Nesbitt in the 1941 case. Was that ever referenced as far as what you were working on for them?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And so, as far as like any long-range capital improvement plans, did you ever work with them on that, or did they reference anything like that?
No,
Okay. And so then in this application,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
If, Mr. Valines, if you had such information, if they'd reached out and said, well, we need another employee to do work on leak detection, or Mr. Nesbitt is going to be working on trying to develop an infrastructure plan or something for the district, would you have taken that into consideration in working on filing the rate case?
yes, sir, I guess so. It depends on the details. Of course, we're pretty much limited to working with the test year financials and then any known and measurable changes to that data. If there were items that could be included as adjustments to the rates, I certainly would have included those. But my responsibility was primarily just doing the ARF study and application.
Right. And you just rely upon what the water district gives you in terms of information, correct?
Correct, and there's certain things that I know need to be included, and I try to cover the bases. This particular study was done in a pretty tight time frame. We got involved about 6 weeks before the deadline that the PSC had given the utility, so wasn't a lot of time for conversation.
Did they tell you why you were contacted about 6 weeks before the deadline?
Best I remember, there was some confusion about the approach they were going to take to meeting that.
Well, the
requirement.
confusion was we ordered them to file an ARF, and somebody decided, as they had for the last 25 years, to file an 023 case. And an 023 case won't keep a water district financially sound, will it?
No, sir.
Okay. No, I have nothing further. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And so on that note, and just to clarify, you had mentioned that they don't have records to account for their assets of depreciation, and that does hurt the water utility. Can you describe how depreciation is accounted for differently in an RD loan than what you account for it in your analysis?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, RD does not allow depreciation expense to be included in their rate computations, and that's a significant difference. It really does hurt the utility because major expenses like that should be included, and of course, that's so important for upgrade of the system and also major maintenance items within the system. So with the RD cases, that's left out. RD does allow an item called short-term assets. If they were to buy new water meters or new pickup trucks and so forth, those are allowed, but it never comes anywhere close to what total depreciation expense is for a utility like this.
Okay, thank you. And is that even more important when a utility is struggling because of lack of infrastructure or failing infrastructure?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to just ask you about the ARF application. Did you develop options as far as like what you would submit to the PSC? And I'm specifically talking about the two-phase approach. Did you recommend that to the board, or was there another option?
No, I did recommend that, just to gradually increase rates over a 2-year period. We were recommending I think it was a 26% rate increase, which I felt was pretty significant. And so I did suggest that they might want to look at a two-phase approach. And I think the utility agreed with that too.
Okay, and then in the response to Commission staff report, did you help Mr. Elam with his response to that, or was that just from the board?
Yes, ma'am, I did help. I reviewed the staff report. I always look at differences between what's in the application and what the staff comes back with, and I did advise Mr. Elam on his response to that.
Okay, and could I ask you to explain, while the utility accepted the staff report, the response explained that they did not agree with some of the way that the labor expenses were accounted for. And just to briefly explain that point of contention, I believe it's specifically where staff recommended that after-hour labor, reconnection, and things like that be accounted for in regular revenue versus non-recurring charges. Could I ask, why you would recommend it being accounted for differently?
I think one of the fundamental premises in rate making, and I think it's a very good premise, is that to the degree possible, customers that cause a cost should be responsible for paying that cost. And that's why non-recurring charges were developed originally with labor and equipment charges included. If you move those charges to general service rates, the utility does recover the same amount of revenue, theoretically, but the customer that requested that service isn't paying for the service directly. Of course, there may be some thinking that water districts have people available to do these things, and therefore it's no extra cost to go out and provide that service. But the truth is there is other worthwhile work, leak detection, for example, routine maintenance throughout the system, that each of those employees could be doing, especially in the smaller utilities. And so it takes away from those everyday important duties for them to do reconnects, connects, and service calls, specifically for one customer in that situation, in each case. So I think a lot of people agree with me that those costs should be included in the non-recurring charges and not moved down to the general service expense.
Okay, and just to clarify, those costs don't go away, they're just moved into a different category of accounting, is what
That's
you're,
right.
yeah, okay. So, in the staff report, the commission recommends a surcharge to address the water loss issues. Could I ask what your opinion is as far as a surcharge for Morgan County?
I think the surcharge is right on target, and I really appreciate the commission starting this idea and moving forward with it. Morgan County is a great example of how they need to spend some more money on this effort, and taking that money away from them otherwise would be a hardship. So I think it's a very good thing, and Morgan County can certainly use those funds.
Okay, and then just finally, could I ask what your impression of Morgan County's financial state is? You've listed their most important thing is that they have a lack of funds, but would you have any other insight into their financial situation as far as what they need to do to improve going forward?
No, ma'am. I don't have anything else to comment on there. It's just, I think the board and management of Morgan County Water District needs to use those funds wisely going forward and put them to good use in many of the areas that the commission has highlighted for them.
And And did you discuss, as far as the frequency of their rate increase? I mean, you mentioned trying to do it over 2 years because it was so much of an increase because they had waited so long and other variables. Did you discuss when they should assess their rates again?
Well, as I said before, I think utilities should take a look at their situation in somewhat in detail, at least every 2 or 3 years, to see if things have changed. It depends on the amount of growth, customer base growth, and other ways that revenue could grow. Sometimes revenue naturally keeps up with expenses, but oftentimes if the utility's not growing, they do need to do a rate increase because expenses always go up.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chairman Chandler, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Dr. Matthews, questions?
No questions, sir.
Mr. Vines, I think sometime maybe we discuss this on some kind of call with Kentucky Rural Water. But, you know, the commission has adopted, I guess informally, a policy of any time a water district has a water loss of 30% or above, the commission intends to each time impose or permit a surcharge. And whether the water district wants that surcharge or not, we intend to add it on to the rate. I take it that you think that's a good idea because in effect, the 15% loss rule essentially deprives them of money they would otherwise get were it not for the excessive water loss. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
In terms of Morgan County Water District, I know you indicated that there were insufficient records with respect to its assets for which it could claim depreciation. Do you have any idea what the cause of those insufficient records would be?
Well, at least one cause. Mr. Elam shared with me that in 2012, a tornado struck the Water District's office and destroyed a lot of documents. So I can understand why that was a big problem for them. I don't know about the records after 2012. Some of those at this point may be found, and I've talked to Mr. Elam about maybe after the case, and he's got more time, he could continue to search for those, and his depreciation schedule could be improved.
Well, one of the questions, I guess we can address it with Mr. Elam later, is that perhaps our financial people are concerned that the district isn't keeping adequate records now. They're making purchases, but there aren't records to support what the value of those purchases are, so they can't be included on a depreciation schedule, or they can't recover the funds for depreciation because we don't know A, what the cost was, or when they were purchased, or sometimes exactly what they are, so that you can't help the district help itself if they don't keep records like any good business should. They should keep adequate records. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And I think Mr. Elam is motivated to improve in that area, and he's going to need to talk to his bookkeeping people and accounting people. I think they have a responsibility here to look for those kind of items at the end of each year and question the district about what's been added and help them maintain those records better.
Well, when I look, I think others were concerned maybe about the auditor. I mean, the auditor is supposed to do those things, isn't it? The auditor would, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's one of the things I was just mentioning. Yes.
And I know this is, I've said this over and over again, not just to Morgan County, but every time we have one of these cases, ad nauseum, I guess. If a district has small incremental rate increases every 3 years or so and uses its depreciation money to replace assets before they completely wear out and cause problems, ultimately they can provide more reliable service at a lower cost in the long run. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir, completely.
In fact, I don't know if this is your experience, but it's mine. And of course, I'm from Johnson County, a neighbor there of Morgan County, and have friends in West Liberty and other parts of Morgan County. What I found, I think, in a lot of rural water districts and a lot in eastern Kentucky is they try to keep rates so low that infrastructure then tends to deteriorate to the point where it costs a lot more money to fix it. And ultimately, they end up with a lot higher rates and a lot poorer service. And I could probably name a half a dozen within 50 miles of West Liberty where that is, as the crow flies, where that happens. So I guess just would impress on anybody who may be watching this hearing to you're doing your customers and yourselves a lot better service and in the long run if you basically just manage your district like it was your own business, as opposed to saying, well, the public can't afford this, because in the end, they can't afford not to do it, and the costs become so prohibitive that like you end up like Martin County, where there's just not enough money in the state of Kentucky to fix that system. But in any event, I guess in the state of Kentucky that anybody's going to allocate to fix it. But all right, well, thank you. I was going to ask this about 023. Have you assisted Morgan County in its application for any of these 023 loans?
No, sir.
In this case, and I know, I guess that question has been raised by Kentucky Rural Water, and we tried to address it, I guess, at least on a case-by-case or informal basis. And in this case, I do not know, and I apologize if it's been done, but we allow lawyers' fees to be included in rates, and I don't know if Ms. Stegman's fees have been included or what they are, but if she has fees, those are available to be included in rates. So for whatever that's worth, and I don't know if anybody wants to try to submit something now, but Mr. Vallines, I guess in the future, I don't know if you addressed it or not, you might at least consider that, or get the districts you assist to consider that. I know, because some of the criticism has been, well, you force these people to come in with rate increases and they incur these attorney fees, but those attorney fees can be passed through in rates. Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Ms. Stegman, any questions?
Commissioner, just a couple. Mr. Vallines, you were aware that the district was working on a water loss project with Mr. Nesbitt. Would that be correct?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
You didn't know that. Okay. Were you aware that they were seeking an RD loan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was the upcoming debt associated with that RD loan, was that taken into consideration in the rate study that you assisted the district with?
No, it wasn't. Not initially.
Okay, not initially. Has it been at this point?
Well, just in our response to the staff report, a lot of that information came to me after the application was filed. And so there were lots of conversations about that proposed loan leading up to the issue of the staff report. And now the loan in its current state, it has been recommended to be included in this rate.
Okay,
through our response to the staff report.
okay. No further questions.
Thank you. Any further questions, Ms. Coney?
We have no further questions, and I believe Mr. Valines can be excused.
Commissioners, Commissioner Matthews, Commissioner Chandler, any questions? Mr. Valines?
No, sir.
Mr.
Yeah, I
Lyons, you
just
may
have-
be excused. I appreciate you appearing here, and congratulations on your, I guess, expect to become a grandfather, maybe again, I don't know, but in any event, appreciate your testimony and good luck on the birth of your new grandchild.
Oh,
Chairman,
thank
can I
you.
ask one question?
I'm
Chairman,
sorry?
do you mind if I ask one question?
No, go
as a
ahead.
Follow-up, Ms. Stegman? No, I wanted to make sure I understood, Mr. Valines. Good morning, and congratulations as well. The RD loan that was discussed in response, I just want to make sure I understand the response to the staff report. The RD loan has closed and is the district is, it is now an official district loan. It just doesn't have its first payment until the beginning of next year. Is that right?
The information I have is that the loan most likely will close by the end of May. And that the first payment will be due January 1st of 2022.
Okay.
Therefore, the district is going to need to start making deposits to their sinking fund for that payment that comes due January 1st immediately after the loan closes in order to meet that payment.
Okay. And do you think the district can speak to whether or when that is going to close or if it has closed? To a specific date?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn.
Okay, Ms. Stegman, anything based upon these last questions?
No, Commissioner.
Thank you. Mr. Valines, you may be excused. And once again, appreciate
thank you,
your
sir.
appearance. Thank you. All right, Ms. Coney, do you have another witness you'd like to speak to?
Yes, the commission would like to call Mr. Nesbit, please.
Okay. Mr. Nesbit, would you, I guess you need to unmute yourself. Okay.
sir.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Ms. Stegman, you may ask.
Thank you. Mr. Nesbitt, can you state your full name and business address for the record?
Paul Douglas Nesbitt, 227 North Upper Street, Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay. And are you an engineer by trade?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you been working with Morgan County Water District?
For a little over 3 years, yes.
Okay. And in what capacity have you been assisting the Water District?
They employed me to develop some projects and address the lost water situation that they had.
Okay. No further questions, Commissioner.
Ms. Coney, questions?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Nesbit.
Good morning.
Please let me know if you can't hear me at any time or if I need to repeat a question. I would like, I'm looking at your testimony that you filed in 2019 41 case, and also thinking about your testimony from that. Could you please explain the analysis that you undertook when you started to help Morgan County when you were first hired?
We started looking at the system itself, the records they had concerning different parts of the system. And the idea was, and the plan was to develop a smaller project to help identify what was going on in the system while we're making progress, and from that develop a larger project. And so the smaller, basically we looked at the age of their system, we talked to the employees, looked at all the data that we could get in order to try to arrive at a conclusion as to where we could start, and try to make an impact. And there was one particular road that was actually the original line that was laid for the water district. And we decided to address that, put in some master meters, a few other things in this project, and it was developed. And that was the first project that was developed for the district.
Okay, and so, but your first dealings with Morgan County was that you were hired to consult and advise and to assist on their water loss problems. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so the projects that you are describing, the small one and then develop into a larger project, those were all to address water loss. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and it says in your testimony that you did assess their financial state, you looked at their audits and some of their records, and so you knew that you were going to have to seek funding for these projects. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you've heard the testimony of Mr. Valines, and we've discussed rural development loans, but in your testimony in the 1941 hearing for Morgan County, you described that maybe your first assessment is that you look at all sources of funding. Is that correct?
So that is true.
Okay, so you're looking at grants and rural development loans. Am I missing anything else, or?
No, we were fortunate that in 2019, the Appalachian Regional Commission gave Morgan County $800,000 to utilize on this project. And the project was a $1.2 million project, so we went to RD for the other $400,000.
Okay, so when you're looking for funding and things, how do you look at their rates? And how do you analyze the sufficiency of their rates?
Well, on this particular one, as you're very familiar, rural development requires what they call summary addendum, where we look at, and as Mr. Valines testified, rural development doesn't include depreciation as part of their expenses. In fact, they don't allow it. So we had to analyze the rate structure and submit it to RD for their review and ultimate approval.
Okay, and I know you mentioned that RD doesn't look at depreciation the same way that Mr. Valines described that is handled in a rate case. But do you ever recommend a rate case versus a rate increase through an RD loan?
Yes, and I would always recommend that you cover depreciation.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand.
I'm sorry, I said I would always recommend that, if at all possible, that depreciation be covered in a rate case.
Okay, and so looking back at the minutes of Morgan County, the language used in the minutes were different times. They talked about a rate increase, a pass-through case, and a rate case. And I'm looking at your the goals that you put into the water loss program goals. It's entitled May 13th, 2019. And it was submitted with your direct testimony in the 1941 case.
Sure.
Okay. It talks about your goals for water loss, but can you just describe, do you differentiate between rate increases and how they're obtained when you're discussing options with the water district?
Well, those goals were the short-term goal was the first 6 months to work with Kentucky Rural Water and try to identify some of the losses. And if you look at the lost water reports that are being generated, they have reduced some of the water. The second one, which was the midterm, which we said in 18 months, it's now been 24 months, and I'd be glad to go into detail on how.
Okay.
Why.
Before you get to that, though, I think you're assessing the goals, and I do want you to do that. But I guess I want to ask, and I want to clarify. It seems like there was confusion over the rate increase and what kind of a case or what kind of a rate increase needed to happen with Morgan County. And there was a lot of testimony in the 1941 hearing that that you had testified to, and Mr. Elam, that you anticipated a rate case within the year 2019. Did you mean an 023 case when you were saying that you thought that you would have a rate case before the end of the year? Or did you mean a rate filing, like an alternative rate filing or a base rate case?
It would be in conjunction with the rural development loan.
Okay, so, and do you remember, do you recall any discussions when you realized like that's not what the commission wanted, or that's not what the commission ordered in the 1941 order?
Yes, and the discussion was the frustration from the district standpoint and my standpoint is, we anticipated the RD loan being approved in September of 2019. And it's just now we're reaching that point. The anticipation early on 2 years ago was that we're going to be able to get this rate increase in place and then move on to the other rate case with the commission until it became very glaringly apparent that the rural development loan was not going to close in a timely manner.
Okay, and so was the reason that the RD loan didn't close because you ended up not filing it in 2019 based on the commission's order, or was that the same loan that you had to withdraw earlier this year because it couldn't be paid off earlier?
That's the same one. If you go into it, I don't want to go, I'll be glad to go in a blow-by-blow account, but, and when we first approached RD, the idea was that we were actually going to get it out of their funds, and then finally they said they could get it from recapture funds in September of 2019, and then that didn't happen and drug on, and then the person we're dealing with RD had knee surgery, and we lost a couple months there, and then it drug on, and then COVID hit, and then last July of 2020, they decided they said, well, we have a better deal. RD said we have a better deal for the water district. Rather than going ahead with the project as it is, we want to refinance this bond. It's going to set you back several months, but we want to do this, and it would be good for the district. So the district agreed. So and then we were ready for a closing. In fact, we had it set up for March 24th of 2021. There was a PSC order that was in the mail, we understand. And after the hearing that you had on not the hearing, but the video conference with staff, we told you at that time that we had just learned that RD realized, after having the bond in their possession since July of 2020, that they could not refinance it. They did offer to, throw the $600,000 of prepayment penalty into the project, which was economically not in the best benefit of the district. So that PSC order was withdrawn. We then went back to RD. They had to redo their summary, their letter of conditions. There's not a lot of people are missing from the RD hierarchy now, including the Lexington office manager, the state director, and so on. So there was a lot of trying to figure out who could actually make a decision within RD. It was made. There was another rate case filed. RD told us to file it for 11.5%, which we then generated another summary addendum, filed it. That case is now pending, and it was filed toward the end of March. We now, in anticipation of an order on that from Public Service Commission, because of the 30-day window, we have set up in May 5th of 2021, we will go ahead and close that project and get that project underway.
Okay, and I appreciate you explaining that whole process because it just clarifies why, and maybe you could elaborate on this, but the notes from the meetings, the board meetings, state that Morgan County Water District knew their rates were insufficient before the 1941 investigation was even filed. So the board was discussing ways to try to negotiate lower purchase prices with their water suppliers, and they were looking at ways to sell their equipment and things like that. So their rate insufficiency was clear when they hired you to address the water loss. And then in the hearing for 1941, it was discussed that they needed a rate case. And so that helps to kind of explain why the alternative rate filing was not made until so late. And there were several orders in between when Morgan County expressed their desire to file the rate increase with an RD loan. So I appreciate you explaining that process. But would you ever, I guess just to clarify on the RD loan, you testified at the 1941 hearing that that's how you're paid. You don't have a contract with Morgan County Water District separately. But based on the chairman's comments a few minutes ago about how the commission has recognized that some engineers might tend to recommend RD loans and stuff over a rate increase or rate case because they get paid and that's built into those projects. Do you understand how the commission is allowing for engineers and attorneys and consultants to be paid out of surcharge funds?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And it was my recommendation to go with RD 2 years ago because we were under the impression that we would get a very rapid rate increase, knowing that it was not sufficient to meet the needs that public service would identify. But now looking back on it, it's ridiculous because it's drug on this long. But we thought we were, we're confident that we would have this in place early in 2020, and then we could move to the larger rate case. And this was debated and discussed and talked about in the Morgan County Water District meetings many, many times about, well, let's get this done. And even last July, we thought we had it ready to go when RD said, no, we want to refinance your bond for you, which turned out they couldn't refinance it. But so that, delayed the project for months in order to get this. So this has been a very frustrating process.
Okay.
But back to your original question, I do understand. I'm not, recommending going with RD on the basis of my fees. I am getting a fee out of the RD situation, but I also understand that in this rate-making case that there is an allowance for engineering studies and fees to address the water loss situation.
Okay, and on that subject as well, in the staff report, the commission explains that as part of the guidelines for the surcharge and to try to make sure that there's transparency and good management of those funds, the commission has required the creation of the qualified infrastructure plan and asked that a qualified engineer assist the utility in developing that. Can I ask your opinion on a qualified infrastructure plan for Morgan County and how you see that as different from the plans that you've already developed for Morgan County?
I think it's more detailed. What we've done is when you looked at the plan I drew together, from 2 years ago, it's more of a skeleton. And I think the plan that the Public Service Commission is requesting would have a lot more documentation and flesh out the skeleton of the things that we've talked about before.
Okay, and so you started to update on what, where Morgan County is now on the goals that you listed in the 2019 41 case and specifically the program goals that you listed on the May 13th document. Can you give us an update on where Morgan County is on these goals?
Sure. The midterm goals that we were talking about is morphed into the RD case or RD situation loan that's coupled with the ARC. And that will be, assuming that we don't have another snafu like we had before, it's scheduled for May 5th of 2021 to close that out and do the pre-construction. We've already bid the project. We got a very good bid from a good contractor. So that. The second one is that we were looking at a little further on beyond that, and we developed 2 project profiles and put them in the system to be able to address further needs of the system. Mr. Elam was very helpful with us because he reviewed all of the water break records that the district had, and we were able to identify areas that needed to be replaced. We had 2 projects. At the recommendation of the ad district, they decided to roll those 2 projects into one. It's a $3.2 million project, which would address further replacement and also placing meters in the new meters in most of the system. And I don't think we can get all of the system, but we'll get most of it. And then to put some master meters in the system. That project has actually been funded by the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority with a $1 million loan forgiveness. And we're now working with them, or at least the offer of it has not gone through the full KIA board yet, but we're working on that situation as well, trying to figure out what we need to do there. So that's the plan. Now, you coming back to the plan that the commission wants, I think identification of some of the savings, a little more study on it, fleshing it out in a report form, and looking even beyond this particular project, and which I've had several discussions with the chairman about things that they need. We've got lots and lots of notes and maps that are marked up, and we have talked about phase 3, phase 4, phase 5 already. We actually have some ideas as to where it needs to go. All of that right now is more notes on maps and, some of my notes when I've talked to the chairman. So all of that needs to be memorialized and placed in a report, and in the type of report that you're talking about and submitted to the Public Service Commission.
Okay. So just to clarify, the $3.2 million project that includes replacement for meters, is that the project that's still in the WRIS system? You said
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, but you said that it is going to be funded by KIA?
Yes, they've extended an offer to the district to fund it.
Okay. So after this project that's in 2021, 146, the RD 023, for the water line extension and the chlorine room and that project, then you'll start to work on this other one as far as the meter replacement?
Yes, it is a water loss project is what it is. So, in order to try to address, understand the system, put in new meters as everyone, the Public Service Commission recognizes the meters here need to be replaced, put in some more master meters in the system so we can understand where the water is flowing, and then replace a little more water line that is inadequate in today's world.
Okay. I understand that the medium range goals were dependent on the RD loan and project, but I guess looking at how you quantified the goals as far as water loss and reducing them by 5%, I'm just looking at it and looking at the water loss statements from Morgan County. I just wondered how you're judging that, your 5% reduction from month to month, or your yearly average. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I am. That would be over a yearly average. We're looking at this, we looked at the total water loss for the district and then looked at the amount of water that we believe is being lost in this particular section of line, and looked at what we could then save and use that as a 5% as an estimate of what the water we could keep from leaking in the system.
Okay, and you talked about being able to identify the progress and quantify it. So do you feel like the system has improved since you were here for the July 2019 hearing?
They are working very, very hard with the tools they have with the Morgan County Water District. When I meet with them, and we talk about a lot of things, and I feel like they've done a really good job of trying to take what they have and manage it in a manner until we can get more equipment, more replacement lines and more meters in place. They've done a very good job of managing their system.
Okay, and as far as the state of the utility, are the RD projects and the projects that you discussed, is that a total solution for putting the water district back on track? Do you think?
That's steps in the right direction. I'm not saying it's a total solution. I think that, like I mentioned, I think there'll be a project, that's phase 1 and 2. I think there'll be a phase 3 and 4.
Okay.
Follow.
Okay, and so I guess specifically I'm thinking about the items that aren't addressed in those projects, like depreciation and their other financial issues that would only be addressed through a regular rate case. Did you hear when I asked Mr. Valines about the 3 obstacles the utility identified as money, employees for leak detection, and equipment? Do you agree that those obstacles could all be addressed in a rate case?
Absolutely.
Okay, and could those all be addressed in the RD projects?
No.
Okay, okay. And so just specifically, I wondered about a capital improvement plan. Have you helped with developing that for Morgan County?
I do not have one formalized. We have done some informal work, but I think that needs to, based on your order that's going to come out, we need to formalize it, take all of the discussions and notes and sketches that we have done and formalize it and present it to the Public Service Commission.
Okay. And I know that you work with lots of water districts. Would you say that it's common for water districts not to take the full recommended rate increase from the commission in a rate case? Have you ever experienced something like that before with other water districts?
Yes, I have, and I guess I have to agree with the chairman when, I think there's issues. I have to say, though, I'm not elected, so, I don't have to run for office, but it's very common not to take the full depreciation as part of a rate case.
Okay, full depreciation, but how have you seen it affect those water districts over the years? How long does it take for them to recover? And how do they pull out of those?
I think they have to start taking depreciation, and it can take years to recover. It's not, once you reach this state, it's not, and it doesn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight, and it won't correct itself overnight. But as you move forward, you can make the corrections. And working with Morgan County, I've been very impressed with the steps that they've done moving forward.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I have no further questions. Thank you,
Vice-
Mr. Nesbitt.
Vice Chairman Chandler, questions?
Yeah, just a couple, Chairman. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Nesbitt.
Good morning.
Just going back to your comments there on the capital improvement plan. Could you just walk me through, what conversations you all have had to date that has created those sort of back of the envelope determinations as to what a capital improvement plan looks like, and maybe who those conversations have included?
Sure. Before Chairman Elam came on, we actually sat down in the very first, the RD project, and said, what is the absolute worst section of line based on your experience and break records and everything else. And so that was the identification of the area based on the RD. Now, after Shannon Elam came on, he actually reviewed some more records, and we actually modified that plan to reflect what he was able to identify for us. It was almost like we felt like we were hitting the worst of the worst, but I couldn't say that for sure, but we knew that by doing this, we are going to make progress. Then in the next particular situation on the KIA, we knew that we needed meters. Meters in the district had been very old. And we also knew that there was another sectional line that, based on break records, had a lot of breaks and was older and needed to be replaced. And so we actually, like I said, we started out making it as a two-phase project, and upon recommendation of the Ad District, rolled them together, and that became phase two. It also has a lot of master meters in it, so that we can identify the water flow. So then, based on the parameters, and even the first one has some water meters on it. So as these numbers come in and we start identifying what's going on in the system, it will actually help us identify even better on phase 3 and 4 as to what we need to do to fine tune the system. It was more of, when you talk about back of the envelope, it was sitting down with the districts, their maintenance people, where is it that you're having problems? What do you have a problem with, and how do you identify it? And obviously the meters. You got to have new meters. We have to have meters. And as part of the RD project, the district will also, in the budget is for their own meter testing equipment as well, so they can do their own meter testing and potentially repair. So, but regardless, that's how it's sitting down with them and trying to pull the information from the people that actually run the system.
So, so that's the sort of the capital needs side, right, of the capital improvement plan. Have there been any conversations with any, finance folks, the bookkeeper, the accountant, to determine, what the impact of potential, what the rate impact or the revenue impact of potential increases might be? Or is it just up to now been focusing on what the capital needs are?
No, we asked for their audits when we first came in. We wanted the last 3 years, and we now keep their audits up to date. And when I'm at the board meetings, they pass out their financial information. We gather that as well, and keep in. We look at their. They have their lost water reports. We gather that. We're looking at it and seeing what impact that some of the short-term, the operational type things that they're doing, and it is making an impact. It is. So, and when we looked at, we look at the purchased water. I mean, if you looked at it over the last 5 years, you can see that it's going up and up, which is it's not a direct reflection of the use in the system. It's a direct reflection of the leaks in the system, and we're going to follow that as we go forward to for be able to show that we've been able to achieve the goal we've set out there.
Is there anybody that you've dealt with, as a consultant for the utility or as an agent or even someone at Morgan County that is looking at the sort of financial planning aspect of the utility, looking out 3 to 5 years on the whether revenue is sufficient, or is that something that falls under your all's purview?
I have to say between the manager, Shannon Elam, and our firm, we're jointly looking to that situation, yes.
Okay. What's your expectation? Let's say that we return. I asked for you to provide two responses if you can. One, the reality of what the reality of the situation or the situation with Morgan County, and then in a perfect world, right? So I guess my question is, how long, what sort of time horizon should a capital improvement plan have in your experience?
I think you need to look 10 years on a capital improvements program. When you look at these, you look at funding of them. The RD is sort of an extreme example of how long it takes. But even today, if we were to identify a project and place it in the project portal, if we submitted it to KIA by the end of the year, then you're talking 2022 for funding and construction late 2022 or 2023. So these projects take a while to develop, get funded, the engineering, the easements, everything else. So I think you have to look at a 10-year period in order to look at it.
So you have quite a bit of experience with different types of utilities, probably municipal and water districts alike. Are all rural water districts is let me say this, is RD and KIA the only place that they can get? Let me take a step back. How many utilities do you work with that are able to fund medium-sized projects with utility-generated income?
Well, our goal is to when we try to get a project funded, is to get 100% grant, and sometimes we're successful with that. But there's funding a project. To me, I've made this comment, and I'll make it again, is that it's like working a jigsaw puzzle where the shape and the size of the pieces change every day. Depending on the funding programs, obviously we know that there's talk of an infrastructure bill and so on, so we need to get ready for that, things like that. But most projects we will tend to get somewhere between 50 and 75% grant, and the rest of it could be loan. That's pretty typical for what we do.
Right, but do you ever have utilities that are able to do medium-sized projects, depending on their size, without having to seek outside capital or grants, that are able to do it from depreciation reserve or some other internally generated funding?
No, because of the lack of funding of depreciation, it's even worse in the people. I'll say this, it's even worse in non-PSC regulated utilities than it is in PSC regulated utilities funding depreciation. And so people don't usually have enough money saved to internally fund a project. That's extremely rare.
Well, and I guess that's maybe where I was getting to, and I appreciate the insight that it almost feels like if a utility, this is generic, but if a utility doesn't adequately fund depreciation all the time, right, or most of the time, and there aren't these big gaps where depreciation isn't fully funded, that you're then effectively beholden to whatever funding you can get for even medium-sized projects, right? That if RD holds up something if you've not throughout time adequately funded depreciation, you might have to wait, you might have to wait as long as it takes RD, right, to come up with that. Is that a fair characterization?
Absolutely, that's very, very correct. And what you're doing is you're assuming, if you don't take depreciation, you're assuming there's going to be more grants in the future, and we don't know, beyond the next couple of years, who knows about funding, even very well in the future, maybe 100% loan or self-funding and a depreciation. So having depreciation funded, having some money to where you can do some of the smaller projects with your depreciation money is very key.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mr. Nesbitt. That's all the questions I have, Chairman.
Dr. Matthews, questions?
I just have one question, Mr. Nesbitt. Has been the perception that there's more money available for line extensions, perhaps, than there are of maintenance of existing systems, or of, these going back to not just maintaining, but actually maybe going back and fixing some things. Is that true, or is that just a perception?
It has been until recently. I think that some of the guidelines from Kentucky Infrastructure Authority recently is they've given credit for replacing water lines, and up until a year or two ago, that very much was true. And then it also hurt the utility because getting something financed, if they had to finance it, they didn't have depreciation without picking up new customers. You had no new revenue streams to offset the bonds. Therefore, the only way to recover the funds was a rate increase. And again, coming back to what Commissioner Chandler said, the depreciation is really the key. But so that has changed. We have a tremendous amount of projects on waterline replacement that we're doing, and we're getting them funded. In particular, in the mountains, Appalachian Regional Commission has been very good for funding a lot of those projects.
And meters and zone meters as well?
Yes, I mean, when I say waterline replacement, when we do a waterline replacement, we do all new valves, meters, zone meters. I mean, I don't, if you're going to do it right and get it done right.
Well, that's certainly what I hope happens. Thank you so much. I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nesbitt, good to see you again. Of course, I say this, and you understand it, but I say this for the benefit of the Morgan County commissioners and Mr. Elam. What the Public Service Commission has been trying to do, at least since we had new commissioners in 2016 up to this date, is to try to help rural water districts basically get into a financial position where they can always provide safe, reliable drinking water at a reasonable price. And as you have discussed earlier, when over time new lines were put in when these districts were formed, and I guess at the time nobody thought about the fact that you had to manage the district like one managed his own business, so that when facilities wore out, that they could be replaced with the depreciation reserves that were embedded in rates as time went by. But obviously what happened is that for whatever reasons, political considerations, or basically a lack of understanding, or the inability to, put up with a public that said, I don't want to pay anymore for water, you get into a position where, like Morgan County, and Morgan County isn't as bad as some, but where in 2019, the district was losing $267,731 in revenue because of water loss. But at that time, the water loss was, I think, 45.4%. And I know it's come down. So I guess what I'm saying is in the past, the Public Service Commission looked at rural water districts and said, well, it's up to them, we'll let them do whatever they want to do, okay? But the problem is that a regulatory body, I think, has a duty to help make things better, especially when it gets to the point where local governmental entities can't do it themselves, for obviously when you get into a hole like this. So our goal is not to be punitive, but to try to be helpful. But that's not always appreciated, unfortunately, and maybe sometimes we obviously make mistakes too. What I think we'd like for you to do is to develop a comprehensive, qualified infrastructure plan, looking forward for a few years. In the past, the commission has refused to allow any money to a water district for above a 15% water loss. And we've evolved over time to where now basically we understand that can be very hurtful to the finances of a water district. So what we're trying to do is allow that money to go back to the district, but it has to go back with strings on it, so that the district has to spend the money on infrastructure and basically building up its system. To that end, while in the past the commission required an engineering study and basically to present it to the commission in the context of a rate case before you could even get a consideration of a surcharge, we're now at the point where we're requiring surcharges and allowing the engineer to basically develop the project and be paid out of the surcharge account, because otherwise the district would never have sufficient funding to be able to basically get the project going in the first place. And I say this to Mr. Elam. He's been on the commission as chairman and now as general manager. As time goes by, and I'm sure you've seen this, we've noted in Morgan County like others, water district commissioners come and go. And you can get training, and then as soon as somebody gets trained, maybe a judge executive's term ends or comes on board and somebody's term ends and you get other people in. And so in 5 years or 10 years, Mr. Elam may not be here and these present board members may not be here. But if we can get a plan together, Mr. Nesbitt, with your assistance and with the Public Service Commission monitoring it every few years as we go forward, what you can have is you can have some continuity of running the district that basically goes beyond the personal efforts of the individuals who are now there. Does that make any sense at all?
It makes perfect sense, Mr. Chairman.
So I guess what, for Mr. Elam and the commissioners, when an order comes out that basically permits the surcharge, you need to read it carefully, because you need to open a separate surcharge account in a bank. Right? The money goes in, and basically it's only spent once a letter or something is filed with the commission and says we want to hire Mr. Nesbitt to do a comprehensive qualified infrastructure plan, and here's what we may think. And so as the bills come in, they'll come in here, and we can authorize payment. So ultimately, we also know, and we'll be talking to you, Mr. Elam, in a minute, you've got a lot of meters. I think at one point, 2019, there were like 1,900 meters beyond 10 years. And we've looked at your plan, and you're never going to catch up on getting your meters replaced unless something is done, and we want to help you do that, okay? So and I would encourage you, and you're a council, one of the best things you can do is you get a good lawyer and a good engineer, use them, okay? If there's a question you have or some doubt, all you have to do is call down here at the Public Service Commission, and somebody will help you, or we'll get you the help that you need. So we don't want to run afoul of you or you run afoul of us, because we're all in it as partners. as what somebody says, we're all in this together. Oh, Mr. Nesbitt, I understand that maybe this last COVID bill, $1.9 trillion, there's supposed to be money available maybe for local water projects. I don't know if you know about that, but you might check into it. I'm not sure what branch of, whether it be Department of Local Government here or somewhere, but we know of one water district that's already talking to people in the newspaper saying they're advocating for the governor's office to get some money. So you might want to try to dip in and get your hand in it before somebody else takes it all. Okay?
Thank you, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, thank you. I don't have any other questions. I just wanted to preach at you a little bit, so thank you. Anything, Ms. Stedman?
No, Commissioner, no questions.
Ms. Koenig? Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Nesbitt, I'd appreciate it if you could stay on the line. We probably just have maybe a couple more people we'd be asking questions of. And we need to take a recess for the court reporter right now for about 10 minutes. But rather than excuse you, I'd like for you to hear the rest of the questioning, because I think you're going to be instrumental in, in some of the things that we'd like to see the water district achieve, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Sure.
All right, that being said, we're going to go into recess until, 10:45. Then we'll be back and hope to finish up before noon. Okay, we're back on the record. Ms. Stegman, are you ready to proceed?
I am, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Koenig, who would you like to call next?
We'd like to call Shannon Elam, please.
Okay, Mr. Elam, will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Ms. Stegman, you may ask.
Yes. Mr. Elam, can you state your full name and business address for the record?
Yes, Shannon Elam, 1009 Highway 172, West Liberty, Kentucky, 41472.
Okay, and what is your position with the Water District?
I am now the general manager
And how long have you been in that position?
since November of 2019.
Okay. And were you involved with the Water District prior to becoming general manager?
Yes, I was appointed to the board in 2016, took over as board chair in the spring of 2019.
Okay. And what is your previous background in terms of employment and education?
I've been working now, my career's basically been in management and operations for the past 30 years.
Okay.
I currently hold a master's degree in healthcare administration.
Okay. No further questions at this time, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Koenig?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Elam.
Good morning.
Okay. Just let me know if you can't understand a question or if you need me to be louder. I'd just like to sort of summarize your testimony from the 2019-41 investigation. And basically, would you agree that you testified that the district accepted that mistakes were made, and that you were going to attempt to correct the trajectory of the district at that time? Is
Yes, ma'am.
that a fair assessment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And some of the issues that were discussed at the hearing, I'd like to know how you addressed them. And before we do that, I'd just like to know, could you describe the process or what took place to describe the instances where you became general manager from being chairman of the board? How did that
Sure.
happen?
Yeah, so I became the board chair, I want to think it was in March of 2019. That's when the first discussions began, I think, with Paul. That's the first time I think I met Paul Nesbitt. And also I met with R&D at that time, and that's when we first discussed our financial situation and also discussed a project to get in the works. It was in March of 2019. That's also when I understood at that time that there was going to be a hearing later on that summer in July, the 2019 case, and that I would be expected to be coming to that hearing and to give testimony. So, we prepared for all that up. We came down in July. I gave the testimony. It was shortly after that the general manager before me, Steve Pelfrey, acknowledged, I think it was even before the hearing, but acknowledged that he was preparing to retire sometime in November. And then it was actually Steve, the general manager at the time, that approached me after the hearing and just made some comments to me about possibly me taking over as the general manager. I discussed with my wife, I was then the clinic administrator for the local hospital, where I'd been employed there for a number of years. I went home and talked to my wife, and the one thing the 2019 hearing brought out for me was just the importance of the commissioners on the water board, and I got a much better understanding of our state financially and where we was at that time. And like I say, I talked to my wife, I prayed a lot about it. I came to the board meeting and ultimately talked to them about stepping down as the chair because I wanted to put my application in for the general manager position when it came available. So I stepped down from the board shortly after submitting my application for general manager. And, ultimately I felt like with my years experience as in management and operations, that I could come in and make a difference for the utility and for my community. So that's ultimately how I ended up as general manager.
Okay, thank you. Did that happen before or after the November order in the 1941 case?
I started with the district, I think November 6th, and I think the order came out later on that month.
It did. November 22nd is the date of the order. I just wondered. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for your description of that. During that hearing, though, you said you did get a better understanding of the processes and of the state of the water district. One of the issues that was discussed in detail was the previous rate case at the commission where Morgan County Water District decided not to take the full amount of rate increase that was recommended. Do you recall?
Was that in 2016?
That was the case in 2016 where you said you hadn't joined the board yet, but you
Yeah.
discussed it in detail during the hearing.
Yeah, I wasn't on the board yet, but we've talked about it since. Of course, we've had quite a bit of turnover since the board of 2016. Zach Ingles, the last remaining board member from that time period, and Zach and I have talked about it, and with the new board that we have in place now, I think the board now has a much better understanding of how a business should run, and I think the board that we have currently understands that it has to be run as a business.
Right, I understand that, and that's good, and that echoes your testimony from the 1941 hearing. On that note, what did you put in place policy-wise to make sure that that doesn't happen again?
As far as the rate increase,
Accepting the full recommended rate increase. Were there
Well-
any policy decisions?
I don't think we made any policy decisions. I think we just kind of talked amongst ourselves of saying, whenever the PSC comes down with an order, we need to accept that order. Because, they have our best interest at heart here. They're trying to, keep us going, and, we need to take that into consideration and not just, local pressures of the community of raising rates and things like that.
Okay, with that said, though, and also, with the amount of turnover that you have, would you agree that a policy put in writing, adopted by the board, would go a long way toward, addressing it for future boards that?
Well, yes, ma'am, but it was my understanding that after our case with Morgan County not accepting that higher rate, and I might be mistaken, but I thought I had read somewhere with the PSC that they had issued an order saying that in future cases that when the PSC recommends a rate, that the utility has no choice in taking that rate.
That's exactly correct. There won't be any choices in the future. When the
So
rate
that's
is
why-
set out, that rate will be ordered.
Right, so that's why we never really done any kind of policy, because that was our understanding that, there's not going to be a decision or a discussion on that.
Okay. Do you think that, can I ask how much turnover you've had in the board since your 2019 hearing in July? Suffice it to say, you filed information to say there's been quite a bit.
Yes.
At least a full turnaround, except I think Zach Engel, is that who is the
Yes.
only one
Yes, ma'am.
remaining? And
Yes.
Mr. Wells, was he on the board at the time?
No, ma'am. Brian Wells came on the board in the spring of 19.
Right, I'm sorry, and I should have clarified. I was speaking about the July hearing. I think he was on the board at the time of the July hearing,
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
2019. Okay, great. Okay, well, after your discussion about not accepting the full amount of the rate increase and how a business needs to be fueled, which you did testify during the hearing to that, there was a discussion about the rate case that you were supposed to be filing at the end of 2019. And that you anticipated filing a rate increase by the end of the year. Do you recall that discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you've heard me discuss it with Mr. Nesbit too.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about having a better understanding of the processes. At that time, do you think there was confusion with the utility over what type of a rate case was supposed to be filed or rate increase?
Yes, ma'am. When I came out of that July 2019 case, the overwhelming factor was from the coming that I took from the PSC was you guys need a rate increase.
Mm-hmm.
So when I left that hearing in July of 2019, I looked at it, okay, we've got to have a rate increase and we need it as quick as possible. So what are our options here that we can get a rate increase as soon as possible? So at that time, we had already been working on this project at that time for a couple of months. And, there was confidence at that time that project would be closed and there would be a bump in our rate to kind of just alleviate some of the financial stress at that time. So that was kind of the direction that we went in. I don't want to go into, Paul pretty much summed up,
Sure.
what's kind of happened with that. But, leaving that July hearing, when I came back and talked to the board, we understood very clearly that we needed a rate increase and we needed it as soon as possible.
Okay, and now do you understand the difference? And after reading the order and after the order since then and filing this rate case, do you understand the difference?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I've learned a tremendous amount. This is the first time that I've ever went through a rate case in my professional career. Alan from Kentucky Rural Water has been instrumental in helping with that. And I foresee us having more conversations later on this year. He talked a little bit about the depreciation. I'm going to have him help me try to alleviate some of that. I've contacted the old engineering firms, Camtech, and the other engineering firm that was there in the 90s. I've already contacted them requesting project information or things like that we were not able to gather, for this particular rate case. But, in the future, when we file another case, it's my goal that we will have that depreciation broken out much better than it is now.
Okay. And then also, because you were a board member and now you're the general manager, I noticed in the board minutes that you filed in the 1941 case and the board minutes that you filed in response to data requests in this 2386 case. Can you tell me who does the board minutes? Who writes those?
It'd be Shernell Holbrook. She's the office manager.
Okay.
She attends all of our board meetings.
Okay. You explained that you understand the difference and how the process works as far as an application for a rate adjustment. Do you feel like the rest of the board understands that?
I think they have probably a big overview of it, but not the kind of the fine details of what the whole process of all the data requests and everything like that. But I think they understand the difference between what we call a project rate increase and what I call the adjusted rate case.
Okay. Specifically in the minutes, it talks about the situation where Morgan County Water District decided not to increase the rates to the full amount recommended by the PSC. It talks about it in terms of what the PSC offered in rates or negotiating rates with the PSC. And it seems like in the text of the minutes that there's an idea that PSC is giving money or has a pot of money and is giving these rates. But you understand that that's not the situation. Is that correct? correct now?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
And do you think that maybe that influenced whether Morgan County Water District came in for a rate increase previously?
I don't think I could speak, you know, with the
Sure.
previous boards and stuff. You know, it's kind of like what the chairman alluded to earlier. You know, when I first came on the board, when we talked about rate increase and stuff, it was always talk about, you know, the saying that, you know, we have customers on fixed income who really can't do this. You know, with me just coming on the board in 2016, the rate case was, you know, was already kind of in developed, and I was just coming on and just kind of learning everything. I think we actually went back a year later after some of the older board members stepped off and come back and asked for that after I got a little bit of idea and after Zach got a little bit of idea of our financial situation. You know, we kind of come back and said, wait a minute, you know what, we do need this. I think it was 10%. I think at that time it was the PSC had recommended 25 and we took a 15. So, you know, I think I want to say it's a year, maybe a little longer. And like I say, some of the older board members stepped off and we kind of realized then that, you know, we did need that. And that's what kind of got the whole thing going then in 2019 of we need this, you know, we got to get a rate increase in here.
And now, as a general manager, you understand the money that you're working with comes from the rates, right? And
Yes, ma'am.
that's what, okay. And so, that leads me to depreciation. And you've already talked about how you'd like to get some more information from Kentucky Rural Water Association about filling out your depreciation schedules and maybe going back to kind of collect the information that you can. But,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, but you do understand that staff was limited in what they could assess as far as depreciation goes in this rate case. Is that fair?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, Alan had that conversation with me, and I think he gave testimony. You know that we've had a lot of conversations, and like I say, he's taught me a lot about going through this process. And you know, he said, Shannon, you know, after this gets done, you know, one of the biggest recommendations I can give you is you really need to go back and work on your depreciation for your next rate filing.
Okay,
So that will, like I say, that will be a go for our next rate filing in the next couple of years to have a much better breakdown of that depreciation.
okay. And so I guess that answers my question about how you keep records currently, because there's a difference in the records that you kept after 2012, after you lost all your records in the tornado, and then the records that you've kept since 1941, right? Because there were recommendations about best business practices and things like that in that order. Did you read the order and the report?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, and so what policies and what changes did you make after that November 22nd order? You filed some in April, a leak adjustment policy and then some policies, but could you generally let me know how you reacted to that order and how the water district addressed that order?
Yes, ma'am. So what I did as general manager, the first month that I took over as general manager, I basically sat down that first month and I went through every policy that we had on record. And to me, as a manager, in order to manage something effectively, the foundation is your policies and procedures. So I went through and I redid with board approval. I took everything to the board for approval. I went through and redone the O&M policy. I went through and done the safety policy. I rewrote the employee handbook, and because I don't think it had been done since the 90s. I also instituted a security, fraud and security, and identity theft policy. I did a safety policy, O&M. We also developed the meter test for what I call a forecast. I also developed a valve exercise program, a flushing program, and testing program. So over the first probably 4 or 5 months, I brought a lot of materials to the board for approval to get all of our policies and procedures up to date.
Okay. Do you think it helped?
Yes, ma'am. I think it's helped tremendously. Working with the Division of Water, one of the things I kind of done with them was I went back and read all of our surveys and audits that Division of Water and went through all their recommendations, and that's where I kind of picked up on a couple of things that they had recommended over a course of a couple of years. And, that's where I developed the flushing program, the valve exercise program. The big thing that we worked on last year was I went out and basically I have GPSed all of our assets in our system. Right now, I have over 1,300 GPS points, and that's just that's our valves, that's our hydrants, that's our pump stations, and that's also our tanks. So I have all that GPS, and right now I'm working with Gateway Ad and Kentucky Rural Water as far as moving that over to a GIS ARC platform, to where moving forward, when I came into as general manager, all we had was paper maps. And the old general manager, Steve Pelfrey, had left, and I think he'd been here about 18 years, so he kind of knew where a lot of things were. But when he stepped down, we had this giant hole to fill, and all we had was paper maps. So I tell my staff, one of the blessings, if there's a blessing with the COVID, was that last fall or last spring, I used a lot of that downtime of COVID, weekends and after hours, of going out with a paper map, a metal detector, and a shovel, and going out and identifying where a valve or hydrant was, marking it on my phone. I found a free app on my phone, marking that GPS coordinate, taking a picture of it, painting it, and identifying each of those. So right now I have identified there's over 700 inline valves in our system. There's 197 flush hydrants, and there's 183 blow-offs located in our system. And so that's kind of moved into, that's how we were able then to develop our valve exercise program and our flushing program, because now we have all these points located on a map, and now we're able to start working on unidirectional flushing and then start developing, like I say, our valve exercise program. And in the course of doing that myself, I found a number of leaks. I found a valve that was leaking out of the top, and I found several blow-off valves that were leaking that we were able to get out and fix. So, there was also that added benefit of it. And then this spring of this year, we started really addressing our customer meters, and we've been going out and GPSing, re-GPSing our customer meters. And right now, I think we have over 3,000 customer meters that we have identified and that we have GPS.
Okay. And I'm sorry. Are we having feedback? Sorry, there's a little delay. Sorry about that. So you were talking about locating the valves, meters, and meter settings. In 1941, you had mentioned that you were going to update the documentation of inspection of the valves and meters. So can you update us on that, and where that is?
Yeah. So with the flushing program, we started out when we went through our first round of flushing, we took a pressure gauge out, and we were able to start identifying pressures at each of our hydrants to get a better understanding of what kind of pressure, initially get some kind of the pressure that we have going through our system. With the valves, I'm currently working with Kentucky Rural Water and this ARC GIS platform to where there's going to be an inspection sheets put into this platform, to where my field staff will have their phone or have an iPad tablet, and as they're exercising that valve, there'll be an inspection sheet that they'll be able to pull up through that platform and be able to mark off what they're doing to that valve, and then it'll be instantly updated into that system. So hopefully by the end of this year, when Division of Water or the PSC, makes a request on, how many valves did you exercise last year, I'll be able to pull a report from this platform saying, here's the valves that were exercised this year. Here's the valves, that we have. Basically, my valve exercise program is set up that we will work. I think right now I have around 62 valves a month through each month, and there's a number associated with that valve. So each month we'll go out and work that particular number of valves. So each valve will be worked annually.
Okay. And then you did mention your meter test program, and I think that the chairman covered that when he discussed that. Looking at the plan, our inspection staff was just like, it still is not going to get caught up, and I saw you nod your head, so I think it's suffice to say that I understand that you were trying to spread out the number of meters so that they're not all tested at one point in time, so they all don't come out of compliance at the point in time. And I understand that theory, but there, that you need help with your meters, I think is what the chairman said, and I think we all understand that issue.
Yeah, because what I was trying to get away from in my meter testing program, with this project that we're going to close next month, we have in that project 300 meters. Well, I'm using 256 of those meters to replace meters that are still in the ground from 2006, 2007, and 2008. In 2009 is when we went to radio read meters. In 2009, there's over 1,800 meters that were installed in 2009. Well, my goal with extending everything out is to get away from trying to test that many meters in 1 year. So that's, my idea was, well, we'll stretch them out over time, and that way we can get into a schedule of where they will be, a manageable number of meters to work each year. And also looking ahead 20 years down the road when they have to be replaced, we're not replacing 1,800 meters of 1 year. We're replacing 200 meters or 300 meters a year.
Okay. But
I will definitely take your all's recommendation, and I will work with Paul a little more on that, and we can definitely advise the plan if that's
Okay.
will be y'all's recommendation.
okay.
I mean, it's definitely not set in stone. That was kind of my first crack at it, of just getting an idea of how many meters we have in the ground, and then how can we get caught up when this project closes in May. We do have a test bench in that. I've already sent a couple of the field staff over to Elliott County, who they have a test bench, and I think they were the field manager over there has got his certification through the PSC, so they went over there and done a couple of days of training over there with Elliott County. So when we get our test bench in, we've already identified the meters. My office staff are working on, list of customers with the years. So when we get that set up and get going, then we can jump right on that and be able to start pulling the older meters out of the ground and then start testing the meters. Like right now, we should be testing 2011, 2012 meters. And that's in my forecast. So, we will have a lot of work
Okay.
to work on as we get going with it.
Okay, thank you. All right, I have some specific questions about your tariff. I'm in our second request for information, staff's second request for information, item 1. Your response was that Morgan District does not keep a record of the amounts expensed to install customer taps. Do you recall that? Okay.
Yes.
So pursuant to your tariff, though, any customer that wants to install a tap 1 inch or larger shall pay the actual cost of installation of a larger size meter. Can you explain how you bill customers for these and what your process is?
Well, so after that finding, we did make a correction on there. So now the field staff are recording their extra hours that they spend on putting a meter in, because it just depends on whether it's a road bore, if the main line and the meter settings on the same side as the main, then typically it goes a lot quicker. They can set that meter within an hour, hour and a half or shorter. But if there's meters on the opposite side of the road, then we have to bring in our boring machine and do a row bore, and sometimes that can lead into much more time in that. So we definitely took that recommendation that you all made with that, and like I said, we've already made that change, and they are reporting their time.
Okay.
So looking at it, as far as I've been as a general manager, we've only done the 3/4 inch, which is the 1,450 tap on. And I think I sent you all a sheet of how how much the parts are costing stuff. So it's my understanding that we take when we do like the 1-inch customer meter, is that we're taking, are we doing the same? I'm asking Chanel.
I was gonna say, if she would know better, I can ask her. If
Okay,
you-
yeah.
Okay, you want me to ask her about that?
Yeah.
But if you've corrected it, I understand, so,
Yeah, I mean, that's just one of those ideas that, we hadn't really, or I hadn't looked at yet, and I thought it was a really good idea to get a good idea of what it's actually taking us to do that. So, yeah,
okay.
that's already been implemented on our work orders.
Okay, great. And now, so you were asked to address your leak adjustment policy in the 1941 order, and you submitted some changes to the tariff to address the leak adjustment. And so, in review of that, your leak adjustment policy states that customers shall be allowed a leak adjustment once every 12 months, providing the customer provides documentation that the leak has been repaired. In adjusting bills for leaks, the utility will determine the average usage for the customer based on historical usage. And the customer will
Yes, ma'am.
pay a bill based on his or her average usage. All water used or lost in excess of the average usage will be billed at the district's wholesale water rate contained in section 1A. So what time period are you using to determine the customer's historical average usage?
3 months.
Okay. Okay. And is that 3 months prior to the leak or 3 months?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, all right. You filed some, materials in response to information requests in 2023-86, and I had some questions about, some of the board minutes that were filed for 2020. And that's outside the test year, but you've already explained that you understand records need to be kept differently for you to establish the cost of assets and make sure that you're able to complete depreciation schedules and information for that. It mentioned in the board minutes that you, let's see, that they were, for the board minutes for January 13th, 2020, it talks about making a purchase for your computer, and for computers, one amount was like 3,000 something, one amount was 8,000 something. And I just wanted you to explain that. It says, Shannon's computer, Shannon refreshed the board on the quotes for computers. Quote for Shannon computer system was $3,235. The other quote was $8,499. This covered remaining computers. And then I have another question about the stuff below that, but can you just clarify what that is? Was that your personal computer? Was that a billing system? Was it software?
Oh, yeah. So when I took over as general manager, Steve Pelfrey, the previous general manager, he never used a computer. So there was no computer for the general manager. So the first couple of months that I was the general manager, I brought my own personal laptop in until we were able to purchase a computer for my office. The $8,000 was the computers to upgrade the staff computers, because we had got a call from our billing company that the security was going to be going off of those computers. I can't remember now when it went off, but it was the Windows security was going to be
The
not
antivirus?
updated anymore.
The antivirus? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Malware
I
protection?
think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
And so it goes on to say that you were attending training with Kentucky Rural Water Association, and you would ask what other districts were using. Did you attend the Kentucky Rural Water Association management training course?
No, that was the management conference in February of 2020.
Okay.
I am currently signed up for the Utility Management Institute classes, and I have my first class next month. So my plan is to complete those series of classes this year and then be able to test for the Utility Management Institute certification.
Okay. So do you understand? First of all, it looks like that they approved the purchase of those computers, your computer and then the upgrades to the other computers. Have those purchases been made?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and were the records kept, and were they were capital purchases? Were they recorded as capital purchases or capitalized?
Well, we are currently working with the auditor on our 2020, audit. We're still in the process of doing that. I will check with her to make sure that it has been.
Okay. Also, and I just would like you to clarify, it looks like, do you use a debit card for the bank accounts as the general manager?
Yes, the office manager and the general manager both have a debit card.
What account is that debit card tied to?
O&M.
And how are purchases approved on that card?
The purchases are approved at the next board meeting. What we've primarily been using that for is we've been able to buy some equipment through Amazon at a cheaper price, like batteries and stuff like that. So that's primarily what they're used for. And then they're also used to reserve hotel rooms when we travel.
Okay. Is there a policy, a written policy that talks about what can be purchased on those debit cards, or the amount that can be purchased before it needs to be approved prior to purchase, or anything like that?
Yeah, I know when I first came on as general manager, the board and I had a discussion when we were talking about different things was, what kind of spending limit do you guys want me to have, before, I bring something to the board, or if there's an emergency use or something to that effect. To be honest with you, I don't think we have anything written as far as a credit card usage policy, but that is something that we can definitely do. And Chanel's making a note right now that, that's something that we can write and bring to the board for approval.
Okay. And then also in that same set of notes, it talks about Patty Gibson of Commercial Bank doing your payroll for free.
Mm-hmm.
Is
So as I've found out, I had a meeting with Patty. So basically, my understanding is that back when the utility was formed, back in the 90s, the county treasurer worked for Commercial Bank. And that county treasurer for years, as the county treasurer, done the payroll for the district. And then when he retired, Patty Gibson worked at the bank as well, and he kind of stepped that down to Patty after he retired. So Patty works at Commercial Bank, and she does do our payroll. But that's my understanding how that came about.
Okay. Okay. In general, do you think that the utility is in a better state now than it was in July of 2019?
I do. One of the things I do want to mention, I think it's been brought a couple of times, we did hire a dedicated leak detector last July. Dean Kennard, he's been, when he came in, I put him into the Kentucky Rural Water Apprenticeship Program. He's completed the first year of that, or the first part of that, and he's getting ready to test for his Class 1 distribution license, hopefully this summer. So I had him trained for several months with our field manager, and now he has been out normally on a good week, like it was kind of bad this winter with the wind and stuff, but we purchased him also leak detection, acoustic leak detection equipment. And so it kind of goes hand in hand with us locating all the valves and the hydrants. So he's been going out into the different areas of our system, and he's usually out, I want to say 3 to 4 days a week. He's out doing nothing but leak detection. And he has found several leaks, and one in particular that I will report to the commission is one of the things that I tried to do was I broke down each of our master meters and broke down the water loss tied to those master meters. And I kind of identified there was a master meter, we call it the Dentney Ridge master meter. We were purchasing through that master meter in January of this year. We had purchased 2.8 million gallons that had went through that master meter. So I had sent Dean out to that location, and he went through the entire section there, or that entire zone tied to that master meter, and ended up, we found 2 leaks. And last month I reported to the board that our purchased water was 1.4 million. So we had cut 1 million gallons just from that one master meter by having our leak detector in that area. And so now he's starting to work on a couple of areas. I started with little areas first because having a leak detector, I've done quite a bit of research online and tried to find some work procedures or policies. I was also talked with Kentucky Rural Water, Tim Blanton. He's a circuit rider. He came up last summer and spent a week with Dean working with flow meters and leak detection. So he got a week's training with him. And then, of course, with the COVID, it's kind of restrained. I was wanting to send him out maybe to another district who has a good leak detection program, a dedicated leak detector, and have him go out with him. But with the COVID restrictions, we were not able to do that. So I started him out in a small zone area. And, I said, hey, here, we just want you to go out and starting out right now, let's just get out there. Let's lift customer meter lids. Let's check the meter, make sure there's no leaks there. Let's put the listening device on all of our valves and hydrants, and let's just see what we come up with. And like I say, he's identified several leaks over the last couple of months. I think it's going to be a real game changer for us by having that dedicated leak detector. And that was one of the ideas that I got from the 2019 hearing. I think it was the chairman who talked about at that time to me about one of the things you can do is to get you a dedicated leak detector. So when I took over as a general manager, I kind of waited around and I found a really good person that's able to do that stuff. So I feel really good about us moving forward with that he's out there in the field looking for those leaks. The other thing that I think that we made great improvements on is our asset management. After I went through all the policies, that was the next step I looked at. Because when I was talking to the field staff, I would ask them, I said, well, how many hydrants do we have in our system? How many blow-offs do we have in our system? And no one could answer that. So we took it on ourselves in order to develop these other programs, our flushing program, our valve exercise program. We had to identify our assets. I mean, that's kind of your basic. We have to know where all of our assets are first in order to move forward. So like I say, one of the blessings of the COVID was I was able to get out last summer and do, I've probably got it down to about 100 valves in our system that I've not been able to locate yet. Either they're not there or they're in a different location in the system. But that the GIS system is going to be huge for us moving forward. The other part of it too is, I was able to go through all of our paper maps that we had in the office. And I went through and developed a spreadsheet and was able to put those, when those lines, the line size, the location of the lines, and when they were installed. And then Paul kind of mentioned earlier, I then went back through our leak log for the past 10 years, and I matched up how many leaks we've had on the individual lines. And so moving forward, I presented this to the board, and moving forward, when we start looking at these capital improvement projects, I want to make sure that we are addressing our water loss needs, that we're not just going out there replacing lines because they're old or whatever to that effect. We've got data. It's data driven. Here's our leak. Here's the road that we're looking at. It's been in the ground for 25 years, well, how many leaks have we actually had on this line and stuff. So that's kind of what, I worked real hard on developing that and getting that put together.
Okay.
And I'm sorry.
Oh, that sounds good. And I would just ask, so all of these things that you've identified and maps and records, line sizes, location, the new policies that address the issues from 1941, where are these records kept?
We have them there in our office. We have paper copies and then also electronic copies.
Okay. And have there been any policies from the board as far as how these are reviewed for new employees and reviewing? I know that you mentioned in the response to 41 that there were board members set to be trained or go through the training, but that was interrupted with COVID. Have the members of the board that are on there now had training yet? And
Yes, ma'am.
I'll let you answer that.
Three of our board members, Steve Dunn, Zach Engel, and Brian Wells, have all had the commissioner training. Jared just came on the board in December, and I think it was my understanding from the informal conference that there's going to be an in-person commissioner training maybe at in Frankfurt later on this summer. So we will have Jared and our new, hopefully have a new board member by now signed up for that training in July
Okay.
or this summer.
Do you agree that there should be some type of a policy about letting employees know where the records are kept, making sure that they're reading the appropriate policies and the appropriate PSC orders and regulations?
Yes, ma'am. So what I have been doing is when I revised the policy, it was approved by the board. Each employee got a copy of that policy, and all of the water loss records I keep in the kitchen area. That's on our board with all of our labor laws on it, so they are able to see that. And then also I have discussions with the staff on PSC orders.
Okay, and just in follow up to the issues with the tariff, do you agree that that should be clarified in your policy as far as when the time period is that the customer is billed and for your leak adjustment policy? And
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yes.
and then also how you said that you had corrected how the tap fee is calculated. So you'll make those changes in your tariff. Will you make those changes in your tariff?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
ma'am.
Okay, and then I just wanted to follow up on your water loss when you were talking about you're making sure that the repairs that you're doing and leak detection is targeted at your water loss. You heard me talk to Mr. Nesbitt about the goals that you submitted in your testimony, and how that's maybe changed. Can you explain how you're measuring your success as far as addressing the water loss?
Yeah, so I've developed a couple of different spreadsheets, and one of the things that I did, I went out, because one of the areas that we looked at was, as I started kind of peeling layers back, getting acquainted with the district and stuff, one of the issues that we talked about quite a bit early on was our flushing numbers. I think at the time we were reporting, like 4 million gallons a month flushing. And so, and I equated that to about $13,000 or $14,000 a month in water that we were using to that. So I went through and went out, talked to Paul and went out, and we done basically an audit at all of our auto flushers, and come to find out that we actually wasn't using that much water at them. It wasn't really an issue there. So what we were able to do then is adjust our flushing records with the monthly report. I turn in a monthly report to the PSC. So, we were able to reflect that actually that it was not calculated correctly at that time.
Okay.
So that was something that we caught out in the field. The other thing that, Paul and I have talked about, I went down, I want to say in January, I went down to Paul's office and we sat down and had a very productive meeting on, what's our ideas, what are we looking forward, what future projects do we have, coming up. And so as I've been out in the system, I kind of spent this first year as general manager really trying to get a firm understanding of the system. what we have to deal with here. And so that's where Paul's kind of talking about, you know, we've made little changes here and there as I found other things out and concentrating more on this and maybe less on that. But going forward, you know, one of the things that we're talking about is the zone metering. I call it zone metering. But we have two areas that in our system where there's only one master meter to that area. And it's a huge area in our county on opposite ends, the east side and the west side. So, you know, moving forward, one of the things we want to look at is breaking that down. And we talked about it in that previous project, the project we're going to close. I think we have 3 of those zone meters in that project. Well, you know, at that time we were thinking, well, you know, that's going to give a start. But after I sat down and really broke it down, there's probably actually 56 areas that we can identify. Because one of the things I have learned this past year of being out in the field is those areas are so large. When we have a customer call that says have lost pressure or has no water, I have to send my guys out, and we're basically doing a method probably 20 or 30 years old of basically going out and driving and looking for water, and then after that we start turning valves. And you know, that's kind of the old way of doing things. There's so much new technology, especially for us in a large system, that we'll be able to address that. The other thing that I've talked to Paul about and that we are looking at, and I'm trying to get some research on it because I don't have my mind wrapped around it just yet, but especially here in Eastern Kentucky, is I've noticed new technology coming out, especially with hydrants of pressure gauging. I want to be able to maybe in these zone meter pits that we install, be able to put a pressure sensor in there, and with our telemetry and SCADA that we already have, be able to tie that in to where we're constantly able to monitor there in the office any pressure influxes and things like that. And I think I've watched a couple of webinars and stuff on it, and so I'm kind of moving in that area of being able to tie pressure to to be able to look at it at different parts of our system. Because out doing the gauging of our hydrants and stuff, we have pressures that's 150 pounds. We have one hydrant, there's 200 pounds of pressure at that hydrant when we put the gauge on it.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where we're moving to.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your testimony. Do you feel that the board is behind you on all of your plans? And
Yes, I think that's actually an advantage that I had coming from the board, coming to the general manager, and coming to this side of it is I'm able to relate things back to the board where I was a board member and kind of curtail reports to what they're kind of looking at stuff. The board has been great. I think we have a great board. Like I said, they all have unique backgrounds where, Zach is a banker. He's a loan officer at a local bank. Brian Wells owns probably one of the largest concrete businesses in Eastern Kentucky. Steve is the branch manager at the transportation department. I think he's over the Flemingsburg branch. And then we have Jared, who's a local small business owner. So they all bring, and they keep me on my toes too. I mean, it's great. They, when they go over the finances or go over something, they're not afraid to ask questions and give their insight and opinions on things. But they also, at that time, they don't micromanage me as well. We had the conversation early on that, they hired me to do the day-to-day operations, and they're putting their trust in that I'm going to be able to come in and turn this around. And I appreciate, them and their confidence in what we're doing. And like I say, we are moving forward. It's been a learning curve coming in, with the issues that the district was already in at the time. Like Paul said earlier, it's going to take time, but I know myself, my staff, and the board are all committed to turning this around.
okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony, and I don't have any further questions.
Vice Chairman Chandler, questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just one short line of questioning. Do you all have any fire departments, volunteer or regular, that use the hydrant system?
Yes, sir. I think we have five local fire departments. And coming from the 2019 hearing, we are doing a much better job as staying on to them about their monthly reporting. I developed a spreadsheet that I give to Chanel each month that says, I get those reports that I put into our water loss, and then I give her a report basically saying, here's the fire departments that have not turned in a report, and then they get the $50 fine. So we have been doing it. The other thing that we're looking at, I didn't mention earlier, the other part of this water loss that I want to look at too is the theft. One of the things that I've looked at, I think it was through Mueller, I've identified they make hydrant locks that we looked at. So we have 197 hydrants in our system. And if you can imagine East Kentucky, we have a lot of dead end lines up these hollers, and some of these, they are fire hydrants. So I do think we are experiencing some theft through those hydrants. So that's one of the things I want to look at as well with Paul when we get together with this capital improvement plan, is a way of maybe putting some type of a lock on our hydrants, and then providing each of the fire departments a key to those hydrants. And the other thing with the fire departments that the board approved last year was a cross connection policy. It was my understanding when I came on the board that the fire departments were using water as an income for them, and we were billing them. They were sending us what they were before swimming pools, filling up pools for customers. The board agreed last year that we were going to come up with a cross connection program, and we'll have letters going out here probably in the next month to the fire chiefs addressing that fire connection. They'll get a copy of that cross connection program, and then also a letter from our board stating that, we would rather them not use those hydrants for anything but fire protection and training.
Okay. What is the compliance rate during your time there with different fire departments complying with their monthly reports?
I have one that's given me a lot of trouble. The other four are 95% compliant. I have one that is not.
Okay.
They get a bill every month.
Do they pay the bill?
They haven't.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Matthews, questions?
I don't have any questions for this witness.
Mr. Elam, just a couple. I guess with the surcharge that you have that ultimately can be used for infrastructure projects for development, design and so forth by Mr. Nesbitt, and then I guess as the money accumulates monthly, you can use it or be able to use it for meters and other projects, or it takes time sometimes to build that money up. Cannonsburg got one several years ago, and they never used the money. They asked us to let them buy pickup trucks and things out of it, and we refused to do that. But what happened is now, after a number of years, they ended up with over $500,000 in their surcharge account, which they could use. But what I was going to say is that there might be times when you could borrow money and maybe locally, all right? But I wanted, that could be a problem. You understand that if Kentucky Power Company or, Licking Valley RECC wants to come in and borrow money, they come to the Public Service Commission and have to file something and get permission. A number of water districts, unfortunately, go out and without PSC approval, go out and borrow money and then get into a position they can't pay it back, or sometimes when we find out about it, we actually take action against the members of the water board, either to remove them from office or fine them money, $3,000 for having executed inappropriate loans. So what I want to say is that we have on occasion when there's a project that's needed, an infrastructure project, if a motion is filed or a case opened and ask for permission to borrow money to use it for an infrastructure project and use the surcharge funds to make the payments on it, we've been open to do that. What I'm saying is, because you may end up with needing more money for meters or something, but make sure, if you've got any doubt at all, come to the Public Service Commission first and just don't do it on your own, because that will create a problem that you don't need, and we'll help you deal with. But if it happens, then we're kind of forced to do something about it. All right?
Well, I just want to say too, on that, I've talked to the commission several times. I've called down several times over the last year. And like you said, the commission staff has been great. They've been very helpful, answered a lot of questions. I've called, a couple of times about some orders, and I've asked questions about and stuff. So the people that I have talked to have been very helpful.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you said that, because we're here to help if we can, and if you get a situation where you think you're not being treated appropriately, you call our executive director, and we'll check into it, okay? Last, how long did you work for ARH in Morgan County?
I started there in 2014, so I worked 2014 and 2019.
Yeah, okay, well, that was a long time. ARH throughout all of eastern Kentucky was a long-time client of mine, and I spent some time. You have a nice hospital, a real nice campus, and I was always impressed by the volunteers. You seem to have a lot of local volunteers that helped at the hospital, and
Yeah,
anyway,
we do, sir. We absolutely do.
I have nothing further, Miss Stedman. Any questions?
Not too many, Commissioner. Shannon has covered most of the things that we wanted to highlight to the commission that has been done to improve the circumstances since the 41 case was filed. But Shannon, just briefly, when you, along with the help of the Kentucky Rural Water, initially did your rate study, what rate increase were you requesting of the PSC?
I think when we've filed direct, I want to say it was 26.03. I think it was the rate that that Alan and I had, that was a recommendation going back to the Public Service Commission.
Okay, and then is it correct that the commission came back with a recommendation of, was it 23%?
Yes, ma'am.
And the surcharge?
Yes, ma'am.
And is the district in agreement that that's a good plan, the 23% plus the surcharge?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and do you think that rate increase is necessary for the long-term viability of the district?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're committed to keeping your eye on the rate and making sure that you don't wait so long to ask for a rate increase when it becomes apparent that it's necessary?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, one of the things that I want to look at moving forward is we get this rate, and then we will, once we get it in place and give it a couple of months and kind of look at our monthly financials. But I think it was Commissioner Chandler talked about what I want to be able to develop moving forward is to start developing that reserve, that depreciation reserve. What I have found this past year of not having any kind of reserve, and I think what's happened with the district over the years is we've not had a rate increase in place to help cover a reserve. So when we have something come up, like we have a bad water month or bad leak month, or we have an unexpected cost come up, we don't have any kind of reserve to fall back on, and we're pulling it out of our operating instead of having that reserve. So moving forward, where my financial goes moving forward, and when we look at our next rate case in the next year or two, or whenever it comes up, is to make sure that we are fully funding some type of depreciation reserve.
Okay. And now, Mr. Elam, you and I have talked about a lot of things that the district has done since 2019 to, in advance of the water loss project that you're working on with Mr. Nesbitt to reduce water loss. And you've mentioned, I think, the vast majority of those things. Is there anything else that you haven't mentioned today that you've done to decrease your water loss that you wanted to mention to the commission?
I'm thinking.
You've mentioned most of them, I believe. I just wanted to give you that opportunity.
You know, I think the big thing is, and I want to commend my staff. You know, when I came in, it's been kind of a culture change. My staff, and that's one of the reasons why I enjoy my job and I love what I'm doing right now, is my staff is really engaged, and it's fun for me to see my staff kind of make a complete change, because what I was able to do was start relating all the changes being made in the water loss, and I really talked to the staff about water loss and how it affects us overall as a company, and how we have to improve water loss in order to see, you know, raises in the future, you know, maybe better benefits or this and that. So it was funny last summer when we were finding these leaks and stuff, and we found a number of leaks last summer. You know, they got excited. They were excited about finding these leaks, and you know, I think that was the culture changes then, of not sitting in the office being reactive, waiting for someone to call. We're being more proactive. The guys are out in the field every day. We're just not sitting there at the office. We're out in the field doing something, because in this water, what I've learned with this water system, there's no end to it. There's always something to be working on. There's always some way to improve it. And with the office staff, you know, I've put a tremendous load on them, asking for reports, and I've worked with the billing company, and we've been able to figure out different ways to get reporting. And then I've had them working on, you know, really concentrate on meters. One of the things we're looking at is making sure we're capturing every meter every month when we do our radio reads. So, you know, they've really got involved with it and stuff. So it's just, it's been challenging, but it's also been rewarding to see the staff really come around. And, you know, we've not had any staff turnover since I've been there. And I know that was a problem before we had some turnover. I went and got my Class 1 license. I tested last month and passed. So I'm a Class 1 operator. Now, that doesn't say I'm going to be out in the field, but going through that process has really helped me understand kind of the compliance side of the water business. And then I'm trying to, I've got the one that'll probably be testing this summer, and then he's going to get his Class 2. And then I'm trying to encourage my other field staff to do that as well. I'm real excited about where we're going and the improvements that we're going to be working on. We have a saying there in the office, you know, we come in every day and we say success is not earned, it's rented, and you have to pay the rent every day. And that's kind of been our mindset. We come in every day ready to go to work, and we're looking every day to make improvements.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon. I don't have any further questions.
Ms. Koenig, any questions?
No, thank you.
Commissioners, any questions? Mr. Elam, one thing I meant to say to you, I don't know, I know you're going to take this training at Kentucky Rural Water, which I think is, from all I've heard, all accounts, is very worthwhile. But I didn't know if you had seen, or your commissioners were aware of the fact that Kentucky Rural Water has a number of small books that basically talk about how to be a good commissioner and how to manage the manager, executive sessions. Basically, it's called the Revised Edition of the Water Board Bible. And Mr. Larimore sent me this and several others, and I thought they were important enough that we then purchased a set for each of the commissioners and our lawyers and some others. So let me just tell you, there's the Water Board Bible, Financial Accounting Guide for Small Water Utilities, which should help you with maybe with some of the records and how to account, Customers and You, which is really a nice guide on if you keep your out in front of your customers on what you're doing and why, you know, a little transparency makes it a lot easier to go down. And then Practical Personnel Management. And then the last one, Mr. Nesbitt will like this, Getting Results from Your Experts, Engineers, Attorneys, and More. So anyway, I have a lot, I hold Mr. Nesbitt in high regard, so I say that with tongue in cheek. But anyway, you might want to consider.
Can I say something real quick? Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
One of the things that, as being a new manager and kind of learning this field, one of the things that I think would help me or other managers or even commissioners, and I was going to talk to Kentucky Rural Water about this, but I'll mention it to you guys as well, is putting together like best practices. So one of the things I would be interested in doing is like going out to other water districts who are doing it right, who have their water loss is good, their records are good, they're doing it by the book, and then find out, what's their best practices. I didn't know if that's something that you all would be interested in maybe putting together, or is it something Kentucky Rural Water could put together, but like, just a annual best practices of the best water districts in the state. Hey, here's what they're doing, because I'm a firm believer in not recreating the wheel. If there's another district out there doing something and they're doing it better than us, then I want to know what they're doing. And I didn't know if that might be something that you all thought of, but I know it'd be a huge benefit for someone like me just coming into this.
I think these short books that I've referenced basically will help a lot and probably represent best practices, but I have seen a best practices guide for small water districts through the national organization. I'll see if I can find that, and if I can, I'll send it to you. Or,
That'd be great. I would greatly appreciate it.
If not, I'll let you know how to get hold of one.
Okay,
But
I
that
appreciate
might be, there are some well-run water districts in Kentucky, but it might be, and I would encourage you to visit some of those. But I think a best practices guide, or maybe the water Bible might be some help, and the financial and accounting guide for small water districts might also be too. But in any event, if there's nothing else, we probably need to break for lunch. We'll come back at 1 o'clock and try to finish up in short order. Is there anybody else you need to talk to?
I was gonna say, we pretty much covered everything with Mr. Elam, so we don't have it.
I think we may be done, Mr. Elam. Ms. Segman, is there any witness you'd like to put on, or anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, Commissioner. I believe that Mr. Elam covered in his testimony most of what the district wanted to communicate to the commission about the efforts that have been made.
Okay, well, thank you. Commissioners, Vice Chairman Chandler, Commissioner Matthews, any questions or any follow-up or anything you'd like to ask or say?
I have none.
I don't have any.
Okay, well, Mr. Elam, thank you very much. Mr. Nesbitt, Mr. Lyons, I know is no longer with us. I know that we haven't asked your water commissioners any questions. They've been on listening. I do want to say we appreciate your attendance, and hopefully this has been a process that through which you can kind of get a sense of where we are and what we're trying to do to help. And we appreciate your efforts in helping rehabilitate the Morgan County Water District. And
So just real quick, so moving forward, so will there be like a staff report from this, and then, so what's the next?
Well, this is just we'll enter an order ultimately from this, and we may have, in terms of questions about, we may just send a letter or something recommending, for instance, having a policy on use of and limits on the debit cards, for instance.
Okay.
And some of those things that you need to consider maybe having a board policy about.
Okay.
But yeah, there probably won't be anything other than the order and maybe something like that that's a result of this hearing. Okay?
Okay.
Normally, many times when we have, most times when a water district comes in for an alternative rate increase, we don't have hearings. But, Morgan County was one of the 11 that we had, and there are others, and it's good sometimes to follow up so you can talk face to face and make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward and that you all are getting the help that you need. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else, then this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.